Now, diplomatic efforts continue from South Africa's side to engage Zimbabwe on its clampdown on political activists and journalists. In August, South African envoys arrived in Zimbabwe, but after a brief meeting was sent home, not given an opportunity to meet with opposition politicians. Now, a new delegation, 10-member delegation from the ANC, headed by Secretary General Ace Magashule, flew out, or is flying out to Zimbabwe. They're due to land this evening, we understand. However, this is a meeting purely between the ANC and ZANU-PF only. Let's get a perspective now from a political analyst, Professor Ibbo Mandaza in Harare. Good evening, Professor. Thank you very much for your time. Just talk to us a little bit about your hopes and expectations for this ANC delegation heading into Zimbabwe. We know that South Africa has engaged in years of quiet diplomacy, and in recent weeks we've seen very worrying incidents of people picked up, put in prison for very little reason. What do you expect to come out of this meeting?
I think what's significant is that the delegation is coming. Less important is the fact that they are meeting as political parties, at least in public. That is the message that it's a liberation movement to liberation movement. I think the significant thing is that they are coming after a partly aborted visit by envoys a few weeks ago. And it is clear that if they are coming, which they are, they're coming to discuss very unusual circumstances that have gripped Zimbabwe recently. So the emphasis on party-to-party talks as a means of distracting attention from the crisis, I think is not working at all, because they are here. If they're here, they're here to discuss something, and that something must have to do with the crisis in Zimbabwe.
I mean, we have seen journalists and activists threatened, arrested, some even murdered in Zimbabwe. Is the country on the brink of returning almost to Gakurahundi days in the 1980s, when members of ZAPU were murdered in a bloody clampdown? I mean, just how bad is it getting in Zimbabwe?
Well, it's bad enough, but I don't think that it's anywhere near the horrific days of Gakurahundi in the 80s. But it's bad enough, and we've had parts of that over the years. We had after Gakurahundi, we had Muramba China in 2005. We had violence and something like over 300 dead in 2008, which necessitated South Africa sending the general, which report has never been published, but clearly for them to have been sent in the first instance by the South African government was evidence enough that there was something seriously wrong in Harare. And then we have had these abductions, atrocities, torture, and so on and so forth, all about which the Zimbabwean government has denied, but the evidence is overwhelming that there are these abductions taking place.
You know, there was a lot of hope, perhaps it was misplaced, when Emmerson Mnangagwa became president, that this would herald a new political and economic era for the country. What is your understanding of why the clampdown is so harsh?
I think it's because the country is on edge, the government is on edge, and therefore any threat of a protest, of a demonstration, is seen by the government as something that might spiral out of control, and therefore the need for preemptive action. And the preemptive action invariably ends in excesses, such as we've seen recently, especially in the 31st of July circumstances.
Do you think that Ace Magashule and the ANC delegation will be successful in their endeavours? You said to me that it is significant that they're coming, but will the ANC have leverage with ZANU-PF? And if so, how might they exercise that?
Well, I suppose much of it will be behind the scenes. But given what has gone on before, the statements made by Magashule himself, by the statement emanating from the meeting of the National Executive Committee of ANC last week, all indicate that South Africa is prepared to do something about what's happening in Zimbabwe. And there is talk of using a number of things as leverage, one of which is the request by Zimbabwe to buy maize, and I'm told that South Africa might use that as leverage. But all indications like that, these are not usual consultations between former liberation movements. There is enough evidence to show that there's more than just talk. And more than that, even if they don't meet other stakeholders, as was the intention, at least from the statement which came from the NEC, that the ANC, both the ANC delegation and the envoys would meet both government and ZANU-PF and other stakeholders. Even they did not meet other stakeholders, as happened last time. I think South African government, in particular, but also the ANC, have enough information about what's happening in Zimbabwe. There have been a number of consultations informally between stakeholders and South African government officials, and indeed to the ANC. There is no dearth of information on the nature of the crisis in Zimbabwe, both political and economic. And therefore, meetings, whether with the ZANU-PF alone or with stakeholders, such as opposition parties, civic groups, are really a formality. What is important is that this African government has been given enough information. A few weeks ago, in anticipation of the envoys returning, many of us, civic bodies, academic associations, were asked to make submissions, which we did. And most of them dealt precisely with what is before us, the crisis in Zimbabwe.
Well, thank you very much for your time this evening. That is Professor Ibbo Mandaza, political analyst in Zimbabwe. And we know that the ANC 10-person strong delegation is due to touch down in Zimbabwe this evening.